Hello YouTube and PC Pilot readers. My name is Froogle, also known to the PC Pilot set as Peter Wright. We decided that for this 777 Worldliner that we would actually carry the video review I'm doing of it on my YouTube channel on the PC Pilot cover disc. So that's why I'm welcoming PC Pilot people to the video here. The thing with this Worldliner, let me just drop outside. It's very noisy in here right now, so bear with me. The thing with this Worldliner is it is such an important aircraft. The 777 is one of the most technologically advanced Boeings there is. It's all fly-by-wire. It's a very simple cockpit compared to, say, a 737-800. Not a lot of switches and dials and knobs, but it is incredibly complex. And as a result, the flight sim community has got very excited about the possibility of 777s, high-fidelity 777s, arriving for both FSX and X-Plane. The reason this one is so important is this is for X-Plane. It is licensed by Boeing, hence the reason you're looking at Boeing livery right there. And it is absolutely phenomenal. It's got, I'm going to try to resist comparing X-Plane to FSX as much as possible, but you have to go there somewhat, because if you're looking at tube liners or airliners, the current market leader is obviously PMDG, with their 737 NGX and the 747 and the MD-11 in FSX. They are working on a 777-200, same as this, for FSX, and knowing PMDG is going to be an incredibly detailed study simulation. This one in X-Plane is also an incredibly detailed study simulation. It comes with over 1,000 pages of documentation. The documentation is basically edited, modified Boeing FCOMs and Boeing manuals, reference manuals and pilot manuals and stuff like that, edited to make them appropriate to a simulator. There are some areas of this aircraft which are toned down in their complexity, but by and large you wouldn't really notice them unless you are a 777 expert or a real pilot. You can already see the modeling here. The modeling on this aircraft is absolutely phenomenal. Very detailed. Heat haze here coming out from the engines. These engines, incidentally, are the biggest engines you can get on a commercial airliner. And this aircraft in particular holds the world record for the longest ever flight, 11,500 nautical miles I think it was, over 22 hours from Hong Kong, I seem to recall, to London, going east as opposed to going west, which would be the normal route. Very large, very big aircraft. A single engine on this aircraft will actually power a fully loaded 747 up to cruise. Let's get into the cockpit. In fact, before we get into the cockpit, let me show you what this means and this means. They have a handy menu here which you can use to load up passengers and fuel. This is the only area where I have a problem with this add-on, incidentally. Ramses and Philip have done a phenomenal job with this, and I can see what they're trying to do with this, but there are some bugs. Clicking load fuel here doesn't work. I have problems with pushback as well, but everything else is pretty phenomenal. You can click these buttons to bring out the fuel truck, passenger bus, put shocks in underneath the wheels. There is even a tutorial, so if you start this aircraft cold and dark, you can click tutorial and it will step you through starting the aircraft up from scratch. Fully annotated, a very neat learning tool. So that's the first thing. Now the next feature is this, which is called Quick Zoom. What Quick Zoom lets you do is very rapidly jump to a section of the cockpit. It's quite reminiscent of EasyDock within FSX. You can just click and you will float to that area of the cockpit, which makes navigation within this somewhat complex cockpit very simple. Now, I mentioned earlier, it is a simplified cockpit compared to, say, a 737 because of the level of automation in this aircraft. You see, if we look up here on the overhead, there's actually a lot less switches and knobs compared to, say, a 737 NG. Don't let that mislead you, though. This is a very detailed aircraft. However, if you have experience flying an NG, then you're going to feel right at home with some of the concepts in here. Let me talk you through some of these screens and displays. You have the normal navigation display and the primary flight display over here. Nothing weird about that. The cool bit is this display right here. This is used to manage checklists. Now, they've simplified it a little bit. This is one of the areas they've simplified, in that the checklists are not fully interactive, but they are there. If I click on this checklist button, this is the touch screen, so I have normal menu, I have a PA system so I can talk to my passengers and my flight crew in the back. So let's go before takeoff, let's tell them seats for takeoff. There you go. So that's the pilot telling the cabin crew to sit down. I have non-normal checklists here for engine failures, aborts and stuff like that, and obviously the normal checklist. So here we are at before takeoff checklist, and we can walk through this now. I can say, have I got the taxi clearance? Well, I'm not using ATC for this video, but yes, I've got taxi clearance. Have I turned onto the runway and positioned myself? Yes. Are the lights on? No. Alright, so let's go ahead and set the lights on. So we want landing lights on, runway turn off lights, we might as well put those on as well, taxi light on, strobes on, put all these other lights on. We are all good to go. Let's make sure everything else up here is lovely, which it seems like it currently is. Fuel crossfeeds are all good, generators are all good. Here's the generators over here. The APU is actually off right now. Bus tires automatic. We will put the anti-ices on. We're going to need those in a little while. In fact, we actually only need the engine anti-ices, not so much the wing anti-ices. Now, the way these buttons work, when you have that symbol, if you click and drag, you'll move the dial. It's a little odd, it takes a little while to get used to. Some of the other switches don't have that. It will be click and hold to change the value, which is a little bit strange, but you get used to it fairly quickly. So let's continue working through our checklist here. The next item, parking brake release. We're not going to do that right now. Flaps, we do need the flaps. We're going to be a flaps 5 takeoff. Here we are. You'll hear the sound of the flaps going down, and if we pop down a little bit, you can see flaps in motion here. In fact, on that main display, which is currently showing me the checklist, let's wait for the camera to stop moving, I can bring up a flight surfaces display there. There you go. So I can see what my flight surfaces are doing at any point, which is great, and also my flaps. I can check other elements of the systems here, like electrical systems, hydraulics, fuel, air systems, engine status, and doors, landing gear, and so on, even down to gear wheel pressures, look, which is very, very, very good, very detailed. So we've got our flaps. Flaps are set. We've already done that. We've told the cabin crew to sit down. We are ready to go on our takeoff. So that's the interactive checklist feature. Another cool thing with the 777 is the EFB, or the electronic flight bag. It's one of the first aircraft to have this. It's basically an iPad embedded in the side of the dash. And the way this works in Ramses and Phillips 777 Worldliner here is it's very simple. They have a directory, and you drop basically PDF images or images from PDFs into that directory, and then you can browse the chart. So if I were flying to, I don't know, let's say I was flying to Amsterdam here, I could bring up the Amsterdam airport map, and I can scroll it around, I can zoom in, there's the scrolling. It's very, very good. It's a very simple way of implementing the EFB without getting all the licensing issues of working with the chart provider and getting that integrated. Just find your charts yourself online, drop them in the folder, and away you go. Very, very cool. The other thing you'll notice here, actually, if we go down to the main panel, there are no radios for navigation down here. We have comm radios. Actually, there's a navigation radio there, right there. What am I saying? Well, you have comm radios. No, I'm not. Actually, I'm very mistaken. Those are comm radios as well. But no navigation radios. It works a little bit like the Airbus in that respect, in that if I go back over to, let's go to the main pilot in command view. Whoops, let's get rid of the menu. We go back to pilot in command and bring up the FMC here. You have a RadNav button, or NavRad button as it is here, and it's tuning the radios there. So you can set in radio frequencies, navigation radio frequencies, the radials you want to track. You do that all through the FMC, which is very novel for a Boeing, but not unusual if you're used to flying in an Airbus. Now, in terms of the FMC, everything is included. They do have full SIDS and stars. We are flying today from London Gatwick to Zurich using real weather. I've already put in my route, and you can see here these first few waypoints. Actually, I haven't put in the whole route. I need to go ahead and do the whole route, which I will do in about 2 seconds, and then we will come back after I've set that up. But you can go in here, you can see departures and arrivals, choose departure, choose the departure runway, which in this case is 8 right, choose the SID you're using, and the same when you're in flight for arrival, choose the arrival LSK right there, choose the runway that you've been assigned to land on, the star, and then the transition from the star. Everything is built in, and the autopilot system, or the auto flight system, does fully support their complex SIDs and stars. So you'll see when we take off here, the SID that we're flying, the standard instrument departure, is actually a stepped climb. And in fact, I can show you that right now. Here is the SID. So I have altitude constraints here, 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 and the auto flight system will follow these altitude constraints just as it should, which is pretty phenomenal. Anyway, I'm going to finish setting up this route. When we come back, we will be ready to take off. Okay, so I've got my route all keyed in. If I bring up the legs here, you can see now there is the SID that we're following off runway 8 right, and then we're going to SFD, Sierra Foxtrot Delta, Ziddle, Dieppe, Melco, BLM, and then finally the star into Zurich. Now, let's walk through setting up the CDU up here, because it's kind of neat. So in Other complex Boeing aircraft, you tend to have the ability, like in the PMDGs, I would double click an LSK here and it would basically load the data in. On the Worldliner 777 here from Ramses and Phillip, you click on these request buttons that appear from time to time and it fills in information for you that you wouldn't normally have. So in this case, the central gravity and the trim. So I can use that to set my trim down here. I'm guessing it's about there. Somewhat accurate, not. I have my V speeds, V1, V rotate, and V2 at 159, so I can set up my CDU now. And this is what I was saying about the switches. On this one, you press and hold to dial in the value, which as you will see is a little bit of a pain because my heading here is 080, so quite a weight there to bring up 080. There we go. Now my flight level that I'm cruising at is 33,000. Normally you would be using air traffic control. They would assign you an initial altitude. We're not using air traffic control. I'm not a big fan of X-Plane's air traffic control system, so we're doing away with that and doing it all ourselves. But as I said, the FMC will manage a step climb for us. I don't really need to worry about violating constraints too much. But look how long it takes to key in that altitude there. You can imagine if you're doing that online with VATSIM, it's a little bit of a challenge. So having done that, let's turn on the flight director, auto throttles. VNAV and LNAV should work. If you're not familiar with airliners, VNAV is vertical navigation, manages my speed in the climb and descent. LNAV is my lateral navigation, so am I heading the right way? It's as simple as that. Let's get rid of this. Make sure the rest of the aircraft is set up. So this one is a click and pull for RTO on the brake. We've already set in our trim. I think I knocked my flaps off. Let me put my flaps back on there. We might as well pop the checklist open once again. We've already done before takeoff. Bring up the takeoff checklist, not that we care too much. Check once again, I've left all my lights on. I know I turned those on previously, but I had to reset some things. Click, click, click. We're all good. Engine anti-ice is on because the weather is atrocious. And we are good to go. Let me make sure I'm in the right view here, which I am, so I can float around the cockpit if I need to with my keyboard. Once we get in the air, I'll show you a little bit more of the cockpit and the modeling that's going on in here, because it's really pretty phenomenal. Alright, parking brake off. We have a toggle button, takeoff go around power here, which will arm the auto throttle. So we just advance the throttles now. Make sure that they stabilize. There they go. They seem pretty stable. So let's increase power now. And go takeoff, go around. Auto throttle's coming on. It's a very windy day. I'm trying to hold this somewhat level. There are call outs for V1 and rotate, but they're a little bit weak. And up we go. Alright, so gear up. One stage of flaps up already. Whoops. Above 400 feet we could engage the autopilot. We'll wait a little bit. Trying to hold this course manually for now. There we go. So let's put the autopilot on and let the aircraft manage itself from this point, whereas we're worried about the systems. So gear is up, flaps are up, the nose is coming down now because we have altitude constraints coming up. You can see we've set a flight level here of 33,000 feet, but if I bring up the legs page, our initial altitude constraint is 2,000, at or above 2,000 here, at or above 3,000 here, at or above 5,000 here, and then at 6,000, a hard constraint right here. So it's basically going to climb us up to 6,000 and then hold us in place. Look at those clouds. Glad anti-ice is already on. So there we are already. Let me bring up the quick zoom feature once again. We don't want failures on, that would be awkward. And I can zoom in down here and get a bit more detail. So here we are. It's trying to hold us under 250 knots or at or under 250 knots because we're less than 10,000 feet. Climbing up to 6,000 where it will level off and you will see the engines throttle back to compensate, as they should. Now while that's about to turn, let me look out the cockpit, out the window here. The autopilot in this is very, very silky smooth. So we're currently banked over about 15 degrees. You can't see much of the horizon obviously, but try to watch the clouds and watch this PFD down here and you'll see how smoothly we level out. It's a very impressive autopilot. No jerky movements, everything is very fluid, just the way it should be. We're leveling up at 6,000 now. There's the horizon. Good old English weather. Very smooth, very well ordered. Throttles are coming back now, as they should. Let's turn up the range on our navigation display. We can see the full SID here. Great, so while that's managing all the exit from London Gatwick, let me show you some of this cockpit. It really is a beautiful cockpit. Obviously you have some features which are given to you for free by virtue of this being X-Plane. For example, that shadowing, which really does add quite a lot of character to this cockpit, the shadowing and the lighting system courtesy of X-Plane. But the modeling as a whole is very detailed. You can see reflection here on these screens. See how that reflection remains in place, or moves, sorry, as I move the camera. Very accurate. A little bit weak on the modeling of surfaces you wouldn't normally see, but we'll let that go. And one other thing I did notice from time to time is these. Sometimes you see light coming through the seams in the model, which is a little strange, but I think we can forgive them for that. Overall, a very, very well modeled cockpit. Looking back here, I haven't tried this. In the PMDG you can move the books. No, you can't do it in this. Everything that should be here is here. Textures are very good. It's a very, very high quality model. Let's pop outside. Oops, gotta wait for the camera to stop moving. There we go. Actually, we can turn some of those lights off, which we'll do once we get back in the cockpit. Alright, so back in the cockpit, let's go ahead and run through our after takeoff checklist. Now we're level at 6,000. So we'll just drop on down to the checklist here. First thing, landing light switches. Oh, wrong checklist. Let me change that. After takeoff. Here we go. Engine anti-iso should be on auto. Okay. Currently they're on. So we'll rotate those. Like I said, a little bit odd to get used to that. Next on the list, altimeters to standard. Well, that's good because we are at the transition altitude, which is why this is highlighting in yellow. So, incidentally, you can click on the glare shield here and just go straight to the glare shield, which is very cool. There we go, standard. What's next? Check call, landing and runway lights off. Well, runway landing lights go off above 10,000, but the rest of them can go off right now. So, runway turn off lights off. Taxi lights off. We'll leave the landing lights on until we climb above 10,000 feet. Now that's a bit of a problem. Because the throttles have advanced now for the next phase of the climb, it's hard to see the checklist, but you can obviously move around in the cockpit. Seatbelt signs. Alright, so the rest of it's much higher up. We don't really need to worry about it for now. Let's see how we're doing on this climb. So we are now climbing up. We've passed all of our constraints. Right, so the next constraint would be at or below 20,000, flight level 200 on the approach into Zurich. So we're going to climb up from here all the way up to 33,000 feet. So we're coming up on 10,000 now. So landing lights off. Now it should just be passing Seaford VOR, which puts Eastbourne, town where I grew up, down there underneath those clouds. I'm going to stick with it for a little while until we climb above these clouds and we can see a little bit more out of the window. Then I will probably cut the video and I will rejoin with you as we approach into Zurich. There's the English Channel. There's the English clouds. You can see how smooth that autopilot is right now. Very smooth, well coordinated turns to try to hold our course. We actually have a 19 knot crosswind from the left, pretty much square on the aircraft from the left, which is why the autopilot is kind of banking and struggling a little bit to hold us on course, but it will manage. Now that's a little bit of a pain. That floating view system with quick zoom, if you try to adjust the view before it's finished moving, it will snap you back like it just did. There we go, there's Hastings over there. So Eastbourne will be down there. Bye bye. Alright, nothing left to do now but climb up and wait. Obviously once we get in the cruise I can use the PA and let people know that we're in the cruise and they can get up and walk around if I so choose, or I could be evil and leave them strapped in. I'm probably going to leave them strapped in. Actually, these should be on.